else has been going through shit. It's not just me, right? I know it's never just me. And I also know that when you're going through shit, when anybody is, then you feel you go back to those days when you were the only person in existence and only focused on your own perceived problems. I had to remember what that felt like. And again, say no thanks. Don't need it. I remember. Don't want it. Oh man. So I want to talk a little bit about timelines. I'm not going to talk about the exact specifics of the situation because it's still unfolding. Where's my hawk? Yes. And I don't do that anyway for the most part, but I'll talk about timelines because that's what the situation generally is. So what the machine will have you do, what the matrix will have you do, is it lays out on the table 5 possible timelines. And it has 5 different structures that you can hop into. And the reason why the so-called NPCs, or the less awake people, don't seem to be discussing any of the things that we discuss here is because they were okay with those 5 options and they picked, you know, their 1 or 2 out of the 5. And once you do that and you play by the rule book for the most part, and I don't mean like necessarily say a Bible or a religious text or something, I mean just the underlying rule book of the society game, the fitting in, the not discussing things, the this and the that. When you do that and you're okay with it and you're not questioning anything beyond that, then everything else disappears. And also you have nothing else to do as far as self-work or anything, because the rationalization and the society gives all the tools that we need in order to pick the 3 things and stop. And that's what most people do. They pick the 3 options or the 2 options. They pick a Democrat or a Republican. They pick a type of picket fence they want in the house, and they pick what type of 30-year mortgage that they want to hop into. And that's what it is. And then once those options have been picked, it has the net effect of putting them directly to sleep, and then they're asleep, and that's all there is to it. For them. And it's best not to arouse them from their slumber unless there's a really good reason, because that's also their free will choice, and that's what they did, that's what they picked, at least for that particular period in their lives. When you're outside of that 5 option table, maybe you were checking out one of the 5 options and you got too close to the edge, you weren't even looking at the edge, you didn't know there was an edge, and then you just fell right off the table. Now you're on the dirty floor along with the dust mites and all kinds of trash down there because you didn't know that it was there, and nobody else knows it was there, but they've been throwing all their things off the edge the entire time. The 5 option people have been throwing all the trash off the edge of the table. So you fall off the edge and you land in the pile of trash. And then you're like, wait, like these aren't even labeled. These choices are not labeled. So you're like digging around in the trash heap and picking, just like throwing shit around. You know, and then eventually you realize that the house that you're inside of is not the entire universe. And then you walk outside and you're like, oh wow, there's trees and birds and, you know, beautiful creatures running around and all that stuff. But when you fall off the table, then you have to acclimate yourself to what it actually means to choose something, because it means something entirely different than choosing one of the 5. Because when you're choosing one of the 5, you're with all the people that are on the table that they understand the 5 choices very well. Everybody understands them. So when you're picking one of them, you know, you have 1 out of 5 people that will support you and help you get through all the nonsense that one choice brings everybody. When you've fallen off the table, nobody knows what's going to happen when you like pick up this little trinket and say, I'm going to play with this choice for 10 minutes. Nobody has any clue. Some people do, but not a lot. And especially if you're still interacting with the people on the table with regards to choices that are on the ground, there's going to be a miscommunication and a misunderstanding because they're not going to get it. And for a lot of us, family members that are up on the table, cousins, relationships that we've had from our pre-falling off the table period. So anyway, all of that analogy, story, parable, whatever thing is to talk about timelines that are not on the table and what exactly it means. What happened with me, at least recently, is I got myself mentally fixated on one timeline. I tried picking, you know, I tried jumping back up on the table and doing that. And that involved a person that was on the table, and the person said, no, thank you, no. And again, this is similar to what happened when I wanted to do Realm Chronicles with Steven's story without talking to Steven about it first. And although Steven's not on the table, but the general principles are still applicable, whether on or off. So there were variables that the person on the table wasn't aware of yet, and when they became aware of them, then they said no. So then the thing is the old mind that I used to operate with, you know, back, that mind was attempting to still be around, and it was wrong, it was incorrect. So I found out that that timeline was not correct to happen, and I had fixated on it, and so there was pain and suffering when I found out that that wasn't correct, and I didn't know why at first. And then I spent a day percolating and all of that, feeling bad and feeling down, feeling heavy, all the normal things that come along with being a 5-choice attendee, participant. And then, you know, I gave it time, and I still have all the tools that I've always had in order to come out of those mindsets, and so I gave it enough time to do that, and it took like a day and a half. And again, back to that other video I made about when we err after you've done the spiritual path for long enough, when you make a mistake or you try and go back to old habits, the punishment is harsher. But at the same time, so long as you remember your tools and just say no. All you have to ever do is say no thanks. Like if the old way is trying to pull you back, the myopic vision, all of that, then you just say no thank you. And then give it time, because it will pass. That's a Bible verse. That's actually a true thing. This too shall pass. Everything always passes. The thing is, when you're in that state, because this is the way I see it, is when these things are happening, timelines are juggling around in the quantum, wherever they're just floating around. Your mind is the quantum, like, universe determinant as far as human actions, human interactions on the surface. So those things are juggling around, bouncing around, and there are lots of pieces that you're not aware of in your present conscious moment, which is just a tiny sliver fragment. That's like what Og says, is the way you even perceive the present moment involves necessary occlusion of almost all information, because your conscious mind can't handle it. But it's all there. All that information is still there. All those moving parts are still there, and they're still informing how you're feeling. So the way I interpreted this situation is that table timeline that I was trying to grab was attached to all of these other things, people, situations, that was incorrect. And that's why I was feeling bad. It wasn't because the table option and that one person that was involved with that had anything to do with it. Aside from that, I hadn't yet realized that that was incorrect. It was that all the other there were more pieces that were actually saying, hey, like, I'm here. That's what they were trying to say to me, and I was ignoring them. So then they put their collective weight on me. So that's what you do when you come out of the myopic state, is you acknowledge that you're connected to all of these pieces, all of these people. Somehow, some way. You can't necessarily see it directly, but your mind, your quantum mind, which is quietly humming in the background, knows all of it. And if you're about to blunder off a cliff you're not really supposed to, it will let you blunder off the cliff if you must. Like, if you have gotten yourself into such a state that you must fly off the cliff, it will let you, but it's gonna do its best to say no. And you won't necessarily know why, at least not at first. So that's that. I'm better now. For now. I'm not. It's never ending. Like the process is never ending. So to walk forward in humbleness and acceptance that you can't see most of it is good, even though it's hard to remember. Anyway, back alive. I always feel like I died every time one of these things happens. Like, I just feel like my whole self just went into a day-long entropy. But then, you know, it's fine when I come back. So anyway, share some of your timeline possibility stories. And yeah, all right, peace.